Hey everyone, welcome again to More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and Seth and I are quite excited because for those that aren't familiar with us, we are both actors and we've both been a part of a theater group in our local area for a few years at the very least. And we just found out that on the 17th we will find out what this year's annual theatrical production is. So, at the end of next week's episode, stick around as we'll be putting in our final guesses for what this year's show will be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it's announced as, and I've been predicting maybe You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, because I've heard they've talked about doing something they haven't done before.
Yep.
But whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be a good one.
Oh yeah, we'll have a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. So, we're picking up our conversation about the animated series of Arthur that began last show, picking it up right from episode 11a. Well, technically, episode 11, both are technically two stories that combine into one. They're essentially the same story, which makes it an interestingly unique case. And they are titled Arthur's Baby and DW's Baby. And they each cold open with the family celebrating the youngest Reed sibling Kate's first birthday. And then they flash back to events leading up to her birth and events shortly following it.
Yeah, it's very unique, like you said, because usually if it's a combined story, it's one long episode or a special or something like that. SpongeBob has done that quite a few times, and I'm sure Arthur has done the same. But yeah, while these are two different episodes, they're connected, which not a lot of their two-part episode things will do. And these two episodes kind of go over a few things. One being obviously how difficult it can be to raise an infant, how many responsibilities there are. But since this is a kid's show, it focuses more on the other kids' perspectives, that being Arthur and DW, kind of handling the situation while the parents are also, there doing what they're supposed to be doing. And one of the things that happens is, for whatever reason, whenever Arthur tries to hold her, Kate gets upset, but when DW does, she's fine.
And he even points that out, like, she doesn't cry around DW, just me. And so he kind of assumes, she hates me.
Which, of course, seems ridiculous, but keep in mind, Arthur is a third grader and DW's 4 years old, so they're going to have some irrational thoughts every once in a while.
Yeah.
And then with DW's baby, like the second half, if you will, while this is starting to get resolved, DW then starts to have a form of jealousy where it feels like, from her perspective, the parents now care a lot more about Kate than they do her.
And initially she's excited because, though I probably take issue with this decision that the parents make to set up the crib in DW's room, because Kate's bound to be up late screaming, and DW's only 4 years old. She needs more sleep than the grown-ups do. So I don't understand why they would put the crib in DW's room, but DW was nonetheless excited to have Kate as a roommate, initially anyway, but then realizes how difficult it is because she's screaming late at night. She can't share her toy truck with her because there's a risk of choking, and she's got to keep her room clean, so there's some challenges, or I guess you could say setbacks, that she didn't anticipate. So then she starts to think, well, and the Tibble twins put this idea in her head, how do I get rid of her?
Yeah, and she starts to accuse the baby of various things, even if they're absolutely ridiculous. And it does not work. The parents see right through it. And she gets progressively more frustrated until she eventually decides, you know what, fine, I'll just leave.
Yeah.
So she decides she's going to run off, and her grandmother seemingly helps her out, but what she's actually doing is taking the time to speak with her, not necessarily to guilt trip her, but make her think, wait, she has a mom and a dad and a brother, which leaves only one thing missing. And this actually does work, because she's like, wait, she needs a sister, so she's like, okay, let's go back. I need to be there for her.
And this pair of episodes is probably responsible for two of the funniest or most memorable moments. One being in the Arthur's baby half, when kids at school start getting in Arthur's head about how much of a terror that the baby in the future is going to make the house. He has this sort of anxious fantasy of the baby screaming nonstop at like full volume, and apparently it's so loud that the others can't hear each other, and apparently not even the fire siren can drown it out because the firemen are going by with their fingers in their ears.
It kind of plays into the stereotype you'll see in a lot of movies that have a baby in the spotlight at some point, where one thing will set it off, and then there'll be some kind of montage or something where it just seems like it never stops crying. So it's entirely possible that we're kind of playing off of that, saying like, oh, that she's going to cause so much chaos. But obviously it was over-exaggerated, and at least to some degree things were resolved by the end.
Oh, yeah. And then the other one I was thinking of in DW's Baby, when Mr. Reed opens the dishwasher, how'd my shoes get in here? And of course DW is trying to pin it on Kate.
Like, she did it. I saw her do it.
Yeah.
And the father's just looking at her like, seriously?
Just go to your room. I'll be up there to talk with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's some funny moments, some good emotional journey in that one. And then 12a is Arthur writes a story in which Mr. Ratburn assigns everyone in the class homework of writing their own story, fiction or nonfiction, whichever they choose. Mm-hmm. And Arthur decides to write about how he became Pal's owner. And, and DW kind of gets in his head, well, it's not good as it is. You got to make it somehow more interesting. And he tries different ideas on different people, different styles of telling the story, and they keep suggesting, no, do it this way, do it that way. And eventually he gets this good advice from Mr. Ratburn saying, you just got to do you. You got to do it, kind of just be yourself in this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really what it boils down to with the lesson in this episode. Because if you weren't here for our episode last week, we talked about how this show in general usually has some lesson attached to most, if not all, of their episodes. And being yourself really is the focal point here, because he does have a basic structure, but then as the episode goes on, he gets further and further from the point of the story. And I seem to remember reading the book version of this story, and really the only difference I can remember is that when he goes to present it to his family, in the book it's his family in general, like his mom, his dad, his sister, whatever, but in the cartoon I think it was just his grandmother. I will give the writers points for creativity on this one, because it was really bizarre. And when he goes to do it for his class, they're all just left confused, if I remember right. And then when the teacher talks to him about it, he's like, well, it did start out as me just talking about how I got my dog. And he's like, oh, I'd love to hear that story.
Yeah.
So he tells that story and everybody loves it.
Yeah. Even, like some of the more straight up, just raw, honest stories oftentimes can be the most impactful or compelling.
Well, for one, it's authentic.
Yeah.
At least in this case. I will say, though, the way he went about getting to his new version of the story, if you will, is kind of a good way to come up with your own original story. Because a lot of times when you're creating like a story or a song or something to that effect, it's hard to come up with something that hasn't been done before. So what you can do, kind of like what he did in this episode, is start off with something simple and then just add different things to it until it becomes something entirely different. And then maybe you'll have something original on your hands.
Yeah. A lot of familiar
So
stories.
really, it just kind of boils down to the circumstance at hand. But yeah, of course.
A lot of familiar stories, I was just going to say, they come from pre-existing stuff, like Pygmalion has inspired, I think it inspired My Fair Lady and She's All That. And a lot of the classic Disney films were based on pre-existing stuff.
In moments like this, you do want to be yourself. But the way he went about creating this new version of the story is actually kind of a clever way to go about it. Because sometimes when you're making a story or writing a song or something to that effect, it can be very difficult to create something original. So if you take a similar approach to what Arthur did, you could add different things to it, mix different things together until you have something entirely different from what you started with, and you might actually have something original at that point. But in the context of this episode and his assignment, it's like, yeah, the original story is better because it's authentic, it gets to the point, and it doesn't stray away from what it's about.
Yeah. 12b is Arthur's Lost Dog, which is basically set at a sort of street carnival, block party event thing of some sort. It's kind of like recently we and a nonprofit that we're a part of kind of did a St. Patrick's Day parade float. Mm-hmm. Kind of reminds me of that a little bit. And basically, Kate sees a clown who shall be identified as Pickles the Clown, who's probably been on the show earlier, but he's passing by offering balloons. The baby Kate sees him and starts crying, and no one can figure out why. And so, Pal, the dog, pretty much takes it upon himself to chase after or hunt down a balloon to get for Kate.
Yeah, this definitely brings me back to the SpongeBob episode where they quote-unquote stole a balloon. But obviously this is a very different setup. I can't remember if this is the first episode we hear Pal speak. And by that I mean he doesn't speak like human speech, it's more like he communicates in his own way, but the show makes it look like he's speaking in English.
Oh, maybe, I'm not sure.
It's definitely been a while since I've seen some of these, so I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, he runs off to get a balloon. The problem is, because Arthur doesn't have the context, and Pal just, from his eyes, just randomly runs off, he thinks it's because he doesn't like Arthur anymore.
Yeah. And he even literally vocalizes that theory, saying, you think Pal ran away because he doesn't like me now?
But of course, they reunite, everything's fine after a while, and I think Kate does get a balloon.
Yeah, Pal does spring her one.
And I think part of the reason why he ran off so far is because the clown saw the dog, and I think he's terrified of dogs, and he was just running from him.
Oh, the clown says he's allergic to dogs.
Oh, he's allergic. I thought he was afraid for some reason, but no. Yeah. For one reason or another, and it turns out it's because he's allergic, not afraid, he keeps running from Pal, and all Pal wants to do is to get a balloon. Yeah. But when the clown thinks he finally gets away every once in a while, he gets the sniffles and he's like, oh no, the dog's back.
Yeah. And then interestingly, the chronology goes from there to another animal-related story, 13a, titled So Long Spanky, which begins with the death of a bird owned by DW named Spanky. And so they have a little funeral, and she leaves a can of flowers. But then she catches a toad following her around, getting in the memorial can. And every time she tries to get rid of it or thinks she's gotten rid of it, it shows up again. It's like this toad is like stalking her around.
Yeah, I definitely haven't had a toad follow me around, but I have lost pets before. Some of them are fish, some of them are hamsters, rabbits, and a couple of dogs. So in that sense, I definitely get where this episode is coming from. And this kind of circles back to last week when I said that this particular show doesn't shy away from more serious topics. And of course, the topic in this one is the loss of a pet, which can be very difficult, especially if you've had them for so many years. Now, I don't know exactly how long they had this bird, because I'm pretty sure this is the first time we even see them.
Yeah, it might be, yeah.
Yeah, the loss of a pet can be a very serious thing, and they do portray it in a way that gets the point across while also not being too dark either. Because that can be a difficult balance to find in a kid's show when you want to talk about something legitimate and serious, but you also don't want to get too serious with it that it scares kids off.
And then that's followed up with Buster's new friend. And Arthur and Buster apparently have a project together, but Buster has kind of been unusually distant and talking about some other guy that he's known for a while. And this threatens the friendship for a while, apparently. I don't remember much from it, but apparently Arthur is thinking that this friendship can't survive because of this. But then he eventually meets this guy, and things somehow work out.
Yeah, this is one of those episodes I'm a little less familiar with, but I can definitely understand this episode as well, because it kind of makes me think of when there are some people that are friends with each other, and then, for example, one of them will start a relationship with someone, and then after that happens, they communicate with the original group a lot less. So there are some frustrations that come with that, and that can be a difficult thing to do, especially with someone that young, where you're trying to find balance among all your friends, because it's like you meet this new person and you want to hang it out with them so much, but the problem is you end up neglecting, and this is the general you, not any specific person, you end up neglecting the people you already knew. So that's kind of what Buster was doing in this episode, and it wasn't intentional, I don't think. It was more just like he wanted to get to know this other person, but in the process forgot about everybody else. And this becomes apparent when they're trying to work on a project together, but since Buster's spending so much time with this new guy, Arthur ends up doing a lot of it by himself, much to his chagrin.
I guess a lot of us have been in a similar situation to Arthur's, where you've got this person you've known, or maybe someone you've had romantic feelings for or something, and then somebody new comes alongside them and you feel kind of like a lame, awkward third wheel or something.
Yeah, the third wheel is an infamous position to be in. I don't think most people would want to be in that position. But yeah, it's another one of those very relatable episodes, and it just becomes more so the older you become. But then we jump to Season 1, Episode 14a, Arthur the Wrecker. And in this episode, Arthur comes across this computer game that he really, really enjoys. At one point, though, his mom says that he cannot play it because she needs the computer for taxes, I think it was.
And then she steps away for a while and says, then she steps away for a while and says, I'd rather you didn't touch it because I'm going to need it again later.
Right. I think this is another one I remember reading in book form. But in any case, he loves this game so much that despite what she asked him not to do, he tries to boot it back up again. This time, Buster's in tow because he wanted to show it to him. Problem is, they start arguing over who is playing at any given time, and they accidentally turn the computer off while also struggling to turn it back on, so they start to panic. And when she comes back and he's trying to figure out a way to get out of this situation, she's about to turn it on, and he is like, okay, I can't take it anymore. This is what happened. You told me not to, and I did anyway. So she tells him that he can't use the computer games for like a week or something like that.
Yeah, a week, yeah.
So at the end of the day, she sends him upstairs, Andy W. And in an ironic twist, while he's waiting for her to come and say goodnight to them, she ends up getting hooked on the computer game.
Yeah. I can't imagine, I can't think of a real-life personal example of that happening where, like some older or parent or somebody getting that into a game that I've been playing. I don't know about you.
Well, I can...
No, I was listening.
Okay, I wasn't sure if we lost connection for a second again. But I haven't seen too many instances exactly like this, where an older person or a parent or something to that effect will end up enjoying a game in the same fashion. That being said, there were some games that my mom and I would sometimes play, some newer, some older, that she would really get into. A good example was a game that we used to have on the Sega Genesis where you could play as either the Roadrunner or Wile E. Coyote from Looney Tunes. And she loved playing it, which I was very interested in. And Wii Sports Resort was another one. And those are just a couple examples. But yeah, like parents and adults, they do still play computer games, video games, what have you.
Yeah.
It was just set up in this episode as kind of ironic that she asked him not to play it, and then she ended up getting hooked on it.
Yeah, there's an arcade in, I think, like, another suburb of our town that I went once with a couple of our castmates where you can go in, you can play, like, unlimited games for free or something by just paying a flat rate. And I think one of them was that Roadrunner Wile E. Coyote game.
Well, it was a Roadrunner game, but I can tell you, if we're talking about the same arcade, it's not quite the same one. I'll have to look up what the game I'm thinking of was called.
Yeah.
But it was vastly different, because I think the arcade game has you playing as Roadrunner and just running for as long as you can. But the one I'm thinking of was a bit different. In any case, it's similar to experiences I've had with my mom, and even my dad to some degree, although he was more into computer games in general than console games.
Yeah, and he coached robotics, you said once, right?
He did. He was the coach of my sister and brother by extension's robotics team for a few years. Because he was an electrical engineer, and a good chunk of my family were some form of engineer, so they were able to connect on that front.
Oh, cool.
And then 14b, Arthur and the True Francine. And this is kind of a throwback episode to some degree, where they show how they ended up meeting Muffy. Because she did not originally go to their school like the start of the series might have had it seem like when it was first set up. Turns out she had transferred from one school to this one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because she was just trying to fit in or whatever, but Muffy was trying to like build herself up to a ridiculous degree by saying, oh, she did this, and she would often start with, oh, at my old school. And I think one of the things she said she would do was tutor other students, even though she was only at that point as far as second grade at best.
Yeah. My guess was that she was just lazy, didn't want to do any work because she's never had to do any work because she's rich, and or at least she's not motivated and doesn't want to do it.
Yeah, that's one thing I'm grateful for, that I actually didn't start out with a lot of money, because it helped me learn that you really got to earn things in life in order for it to have real value, at least in most cases, I feel. But the other problem in this episode is that not only is she building herself up like this, but at one point when they're taking a test, she copies off of Francine to the point where it's exactly identical in every way, but she decides to throw Francine under the bus, and she gets the flack for it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she just seems like the kind of person who doesn't want to take any responsibility for any bad actions of her own. Like, she is, like, obsessed with her own image. She doesn't want to face any consequences, and probably never has had to face any consequences until eventually she confesses, of course, and which is nice resolution.
Yeah, there are some tropes in this episode or series in general. There's only a few that they really stick to throughout the show, and as far as I know, with how many episodes I remember seeing, she's definitely been stuck to like this rich, spoiled brat persona.
Yeah.
And like you said, she avoids responsibility. She doesn't want to do work, which becomes apparent in other episodes as well.
Yeah.
But as long as they're in the first 3 seasons or however far we decide to get, we'll definitely be discussing some of them.
Yeah. And then one interesting thing, at one point she makes up some sort of, which should be a most obvious lie. She said that she won the national softball kickoff, which sounds like a classic Marcy line from Peanuts, and somehow nobody sees through that lie.
Yeah. You'll have to look that one up, because I think I remember seeing that one, but yeah, most of the Peanuts things I can quote are from their big holiday specials.
Yeah.
And then we get to episode 15, the first episode of which is Arthur's family vacation. And Arthur wants to go back to a camp that he went to in a previous episode, but they can't because they're doing a family vacation of sorts. So of course he's bummed about that. And I feel like a lot of kids can be in that position when they want to do one thing, but then the family says, no, we're doing this other thing, and then from that point forward the kid kind of feels like they're being dragged on. But when they're trying to go on this vacation, several things seem to just be constantly going wrong, with things like traffic keeping them from actually going anywhere.
And weather gets in the way for a lot of the time. And reading up on the plot again, it reminded me of a vacation that I took with my family to South Carolina a few years ago. Mostly we stayed at this place in Myrtle Beach, and it was pretty, and we got out a little bit, but it was pretty gray and rainy pretty much most of the time I was there.
It's kind of like when there's this big outdoor event planned and so many people are looking forward to it, and then it just gets rained out. So you either have to be inside where it's all cramped, or it just gets straight up canceled, which can absolutely suck depending on how long you've been waiting for this to happen. And I'm sure for this upcoming July 4th, with it being the 250th anniversary of our country, there's going to be a lot of things planned, and if those get rained out, oh boy.
Yeah. And then we have 15b, Grandpa Dave's Old Country Farm, where Arthur and DW visit their Grandpa Dave on his farm. It's pretty much run down. It's kind of a bit messy, and to a point that there are chickens living in the room that DW was staying in, which would traumatize a lot of people, including myself. And I think that just seeing birds lingering in someone's bedroom in that scene probably traumatized me consciously or unconsciously for a while.
Yeah, I don't know if chickens would necessarily traumatize me, but they definitely would get on my last nerve after a while.
Yeah.
Like if I was trying to sleep and they were constantly making noise, or if they just smelled really bad, or something to that effect. For me, it would be more like if there was a bug roaming around. Even though it's really small, I'm just terrified of bugs. So if I see or hear one, and then if I don't know where it is, I'm just going to be sitting there freaking out trying to find where it is so I can deal with it in some capacity. But yeah, their grandfather, he's kind of let the place go, I think partly because he isn't able to move around like he used to. And while this is all going on, it's like the kids really want to go to this fair, and he keeps telling them that he'll take them. but he's just not feeling too well. And this episode kind of teaches that it's okay to ask for and or accept help, because their grandfather actually has a friend that offers to help them out, but he keeps refusing for one reason or another, usually pointing out that that farm has been in their family for years. But eventually, Arthur and DW decide to stick around and help, and when this guy offers again, it seems like he's going to get mad again, but then he goes, "It's about time we had some help around here." So then they have this montage where they fix up the place, and by the time the parents come back, they're like, "Oh, I'm actually impressed." And this kind of does connect with me in the sense that my parents always did tell me that it is okay to ask for help.
Yeah. I think that's difficult even for me, but, interesting connection that I have to this. My granddad, years ago, owned a dairy farm. So I have that connection at least.
It's always good to have connections like that, whether it be with your family or, in this case, the episodes that we're talking about. Because then what happens sticks with you in ways that other people wouldn't necessarily understand. And it makes me think of a line, excuse me, from Lemony Snicket's series of unfortunate events, particularly the one with Jim Carrey, where after the kids find out that their parents died in a fire, you hear the narrator, which is Lemony Snicket himself, supposedly, he says, "If you've ever experienced the loss of a loved one, then you know exactly how it feels. If you haven't, you can't possibly imagine it."
No, yeah, probably.
And then we get to episode 16A, Arthur and the Crunch Cereal Contest. And whereas a previous episode that we talked about has him writing a story, here he's trying to write a jingle, because one of his favorite cereals is holding a contest to see who can come up with a jingle for their product, and then that jingle would be featured in a commercial.
And the winner gets a year's supply of that cereal.
Yep, and the problem is he's struggling to come up with something that isn't super basic.
Yeah.
At one point, he ends up overhearing his sister singing a little jingle, and while it doesn't apply to the cereal, he rewords it ever so slightly so that it does apply, and it ends up fitting pretty well because it has a good rhyme scheme, it's catchy, and the jingle actually does win. The thing is, though, by the time the winner is announced and the prize is going to be delivered, he decides, you know what, I'm going to give credit where credit is due and say that she actually wrote the jingle, not me.
Yeah. I did see this episode years ago, and I owned a copy of the chapter book, which I think came before it, that Mark Brown wrote. And there's this moment of mystery where you have to predict at one point, because when Arthur goes to the mailbox to submit his recording of the jingle, you're kind of left wondering, is he going to do it? Is he going to plagiarize his sister? Is he going to submit it? And then we don't really know what happens until the end of the next chapter, where we're kind of surprised to find out that DW is announced as the winner and not Arthur. It's a nice little surprise.
And what's really funny too is, if I remember right, when they come to their house to say that yeah she won, they actually bring a year's worth of that cereal and just like dump it in front of their house. It's like, I understand this is a cartoon, but in a realistic world, who would do that? Like, even if somebody did win a lifetime supply, you don't just show up with the actual lifetime supply and just dump it there.
It's like, or at least not bring it in the house.
Yeah, it's like, where do they put it after that?
Yeah. Yeah. But then we have a story called DW Flips, where DW discovers a new interest in gymnastics after stumbling across a gymnastics competition in the Olympics on television. And so she starts taking classes where she meets this young rabbit girl named Emily, who seems to come from a wealthy family and is like super talented and proud of it. And some people think, oh man, this is going to be like a mini Muffy all over again.
Yeah.
But except she's actually nice and humble once you get to know her. But DW is feeling this bitter jealousy of this girl she hardly knows, and really, really, really working hard, practicing hard to hopefully outperform her, to a point where she even challenges Emily to a sort of a balance beam cartwheel competition. Before DW can even do it, she like panics, teeters, and eventually has to get caught in her mom's arms and kind of be given a talking to.
Yeah, and she does eventually. I don't remember if it was this episode or a very similar one, but I remember Emily kind of stumbling with the balance beam, and then DW says like, "Oh, if you put your arms out, it'll be a lot easier."
Oh, yeah.
So they do.
I think that was much later.
Was it? Okay.
I think so.
Then, if that's the case, then I'll wait to further address that. But one of the big plot points that is lightly addressed a couple times in this episode is that her mom was very hesitant to allow her to do this, and a big reason for that is because every time it seems like she wants to take classes for something different, she never actually wants to put the time and effort into it.
Or she quits real fast.
Yep, that's the other thing. And I think at the end of this episode, they're driving home and she sees horses on the side of the road, and she's like, Mom? And her mom's already on it. She's like, nope, you're not getting horseback riding lessons.
It's like, here we go again.
Yep, one of those classic ends to an episode where it all starts over again before it fades to black.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, probably one of my favorites, Meek for a Week. Like, where, we're seeing how much Francine's stubbornness is really, like, affecting people around her, because she's, like, hogging the puck in a street hockey game and just kind of taking over everything, kind of leaving the teammates out of it. Though she claims it's for the good of the team, because she says, the other team is super tough. If you want to lose, I'll pass to you. And it gets to one really narcissistic point, honestly, from my interpretation, where it's like Muffy's got a chance at an open shot. Meanwhile, Francine is surrounded by opposing players. She's like, no, don't shoot, pass it to me. Which is the most narcissistic thing, because she's crowded by all these opposing players, but Muffy's got an open shot.
Yeah, it's one of those episodes where one of the characters kind of becomes a show-off after a while. And at this point, they've kind of had it, so they put this bet in place where they're like, okay, I don't think you could be a nice person for an entire week.
Like, yeah, Muffy gives Francine pretty much a challenge. Like, if you can be pleasant for a whole week, then you can keep my Princess Peach watch.
And I think, if I remember right, there are some times where she starts to falter, but then Muffy will kind of give her this knowing stare.
Yeah.
And much to her reluctance, Francine's like, okay, I'll be nice.
Yeah, Muffy will be standing there, like smirking, or do like a signaling clearing of the throat to kind of remind her, hey, careful. And she'll be about to be her usual condescending or easily irritable self, but then she'll just pretty much suppress it and be all Miss Sunshine and be nice.
And I can't remember, does she actually pull it off by the end, or does she just cave in?
Well, Muffy does say that they can stop a little bit early, but Francine insists on sticking it out for the last remainder of the time until the watch gets destroyed, and then she just unleashes and just kind of vents her anger out.
See, that kind of makes me think of when, let's say, someone has an addiction, or they have this habit that's so ingrained into their being that it can be very difficult to stop cold turkey, especially for an extended period of time. So eventually it often happens where the person will kind of backpedal and go back to how they were before. And while Francine was issued this challenge, once she realized that the stakes were no longer valid because the watch was destroyed, at that point, anything that she had bottled up for the duration of the bet just all came out at once.
Yeah, it is kind of funny because every time she's fighting back her real emotions, she's going like the whole other extreme, like being super soft. It's kind of like that, if you've seen that Fairly OddParents episode where Timmy has Vicky magically transform from a meanie into somebody super nice, and she's like, like super girly, poor thing, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've seen a handful of Fairly OddParents episodes. I don't know if I've seen that one, though. But I feel like both that and this Arthur episode, from the sound of things, kind of set it up where, like, they're going to crack at some point, whether or not they succeed in lasting for the duration of the bet. But over the course of it, you can tell, okay, it's building up. They're going to snap at some point.
And then that's followed by Arthur, World's Greatest Gleeper, which cold opens with kind of rumor about Arthur going around, and word kind of gets to him, and he says, most of the time when you hear stories like this, you don't know where it's coming from. But I know who started this one. He smiles and says, me.
And for those that don't know what a gleeper is, they do explain in this episode that when you gleep, you're stealing.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a word like the writers made up for this episode, because it's the only place I've heard it. Maybe it's kind of like if you heard the made-up word womps in Disney's Recess or something.
It's kind of one of those things where you'll hear someone cool or fancy use some type of slang term, and then it just becomes popular the more it gets spread around. In this particular case, when I say they, I mean Arthur and Buster, when they were sitting with some of the tougher people in the school, Buster tried to supposedly stand up for Arthur by saying, Arthur is really good at this. Like, he's a good gleeper. The problem is he, at the time, had no idea what that word actually meant, which caused some problems because then it kind of started a rumor where Arthur was just a really big thief. And it kind of makes me think of the Larry Boy special with the rumor weed, where a term gets misunderstood or misused, resulting in the wrong message getting spread around and somebody getting a bad reputation as a result.
Yeah. But this seems to kind of, at least temporarily, boost Arthur's image, so he kind of goes along with it, thinking, oh man, I'm one of the cool people now. I'm one of them. Yeah, it's kind of like, if you remember the musical and movie Grease, you know, Sandy trying to fit in with the pink ladies, reluctantly going along with what they're doing. It's like, and this group of tough guys, collectively known as the tough customers, they kind of have a like greaser-like vibe, and it's like in this case, they're the pink ladies and Arthur's Sandy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But eventually, you know, it kind of lands him in trouble with the principal, and but then the tough customers dare him to kind of prove he's this cool thief that he claims to be by like sneaking food from the lunchroom or the school kitchen, which he tries, but then is caught. But kind of like Grandma Thora in the aforementioned DW's Baby doesn't just say, you know, hey, you can't do that, you shouldn't be doing that. Kind of plays a little, you know, I don't know if I want to say like psychology, and kind of, you know, like, you know, if you think this is so bad, then why are you doing this?
It can definitely be a good episode to show someone when you want to teach them that you shouldn't do something just because somebody else says it's cool. And yeah, if you know that something you're doing is wrong, obviously it's best not to do it. If there's an adult nearby, you can talk to them and they can help you out. Yeah, some people, especially these tough customer types, and there are people like that in real life, well, they will pressure somebody into doing something dangerous or bad or risky in some capacity, because it'll be fun for them, but it can cause a lot of problems. And I think there's at least one other Arthur episode I can think of where Buster is constantly being dared to do certain things in order to fit in with these other guys. And eventually he decides, no, I'm not going to do this. With the lesson being, yeah, you shouldn't do something just because someone else dares you to or tells you to or something.
Yeah. What's really nice about how it all resolves in the end, this story, is it's not like, I guess you could say it's not tied up in a bow, you know, it doesn't have a favorable resolution, you know. When Arthur is eventually found out, when they realize he's not this cool, bad dude that he kind of suggests that he is, they kind of pick on him, kind of bully him, noogie him or something, like, oh, you liar, you.
So I think the adults were telling him, oh, just be honest with them. I'm sure they'll understand. But yet it immediately cuts to them like sitting on him or repeatedly bouncing a ball off the back of his head.
Yeah. Yeah. See, it doesn't always work out in your favor, but should still do what's right anyway.
Yep, it shows exactly what can happen if you get caught up in a lie, especially the longer you stay in it. But then we jump to Season 1, Episode 18, and 18A is probably one of the more classic episodes, based on my knowledge, Arthur's Chickenpox. which is very self-explanatory with the title, because Arthur does end up getting chickenpox in this episode, and he's being well taken care of. The problem is, DW sees this, and she gets jealous of all this special treatment that he's getting, all this attention that he's getting. So what she ends up doing is she tries to make it look like she has chickenpox, but she's quickly found out to be faking it.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some pretty bizarre, but in a fun way, moments in this one, like when Arthur is starting to come down with the chickenpox, he apparently hallucinates the elephant he's painting in art class coming alive and coming toward him, which was weird, kind of funny though, but
it's definitely one of those things where I think they were taking liberties, because I don't think chickenpox would cause you to hallucinate, but maybe it depends on the person.
Yeah. And then there's the dream sequence that happens just before he discovers the spots on his face, where he's unicycling in the circus on a tightrope, and then for some reason starts floating up toward a vortex, and that's when he wakes up, which is kind of a fun scene.
Kind of makes me think of the fizzy lifting drinks from Wonka, where they're slowly floating up towards the fan.
And getting super close to being chopped off.
Yep. Yeah, he does eventually wake up with the chicken pox, and I think it's mostly his grandmother that comes in and takes care of him.
Yeah.
And this episode ends with kind of a you deserve it type of scenario, because after he is sick and it looks like he's going to miss the circus that they're going to go to, DW kind of taunts him, saying, "Oh, if you're a good boy and don't scratch, I'll bring you a balloon." And then she sees all the attention he's getting, tries to fake it, fails, but then soon after, she ends up actually getting the chicken pox.
Which she is thrilled about.
Yeah, because she realizes she's going to get all this special treatment, but also ends up realizing, wait, she's going to miss the circus now. So Arthur kind of rubs it in her face by throwing the exact line she used on him back at her, saying, "If you're good and don't scratch, I'll bring you a balloon."
Yeah, remember the book ended that way, but in the episode she's like, who cares? The circus comes every year, but you only get chickenpox once. She's happy because she thinks she's getting the full spa treatment.
Oh, I guess I was thinking of the book then.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you see the episode as well?
I did see the episode as well at some point, because I remember some of the imagery used in the animation.
Yeah.
Like, I think at one point she tried to, when she started to fake it, she looked in her reflection to act surprised that she had it. But, yeah, I guess with the ending, I was thinking of the book.
Yeah.
But I definitely remember her doing that in the animated episode, now that you say that.
And then, appropriately, another illness-related episode followed that one, titled Sick as a Dog, in which Arthur mysteriously finds Pal unusually ill, for unknown reasons that are revealed at the end, but remains a mystery for a while.
It's kind of like the episode where Arthur was coming into the school to drop off a bag of quarters and then they go missing, in that somebody ends up getting accused for why something is going wrong. In this case, Arthur is accusing his sister of making his dog sick by giving her food that he should not be eating. And then he's brought to a pet hospital, and while they're treating him, it turns out he has to stay there overnight, so Arthur starts to freak out, and I think he has at least one nightmare about it.
Yeah.
And then when the next day comes, the doctor says he was acting like that because there were things in his system that he should not have been eating.
Yeah.
So when Arthur kind of recaps what Pal had been eating, turns out that he was more so the responsible one for why Pal was the way he was, and has to eat a slice of humble pie, if you will, by going up to his sister and apologizing for falsely accusing her.
Yeah. And his reasons for initially suspecting DW are actually pretty understandable because, he is used to DW complaining about him or making condescending jokes about the dog. But you can't totally blame DW either because Pal's constantly grabbing her food or picking on her. We saw an earlier episode where he took her shoe, and so you can understand where both are coming from. And even when DW says, "I'm going to teach him a lesson," he's not going to forget.
Yeah, his accusations did have some merit, but the episode still kind of teaches you don't want to jump to conclusions.
Right. Yeah. Sure.
And it also, while it isn't the main focus necessarily, it still puts some time into addressing that, there are some things dogs should not be eating. Like, a lot of people know at this point that dogs can't have things like chocolate, for example. Like, they might be able to have a small amount and end up fine, but especially the more they intake, the worse off they'll be.
Yeah. And next is DW rides again, and this is DW in perhaps an umpteenth attempt to kind of fit in with her brother and his crowd, is trying to ride a two-wheel bike because Arthur and his friends are going to participate in a fundraiser for their school where it's a bike-a-thon event where they're raising money by the mile. And so DW wants to ride a two-wheel bike herself. Yeah. And like any kid just learning a new skill like that, she has to fail quite a few times, but she really sticks to it. She's still, nonetheless, determined to succeed.
And I think part of the reason she was so determined is because the Tibble twins were kind of messing with her.
Yeah.
Because at that point, they were already on just two wheels, and they were like, "Oh, we're on two wheels, and you're still on four. You're such an amateur."
Yeah.
Granted, I don't think those were their exact words. It was just kind of paraphrasing.
Yeah.
But she wanted to prove them wrong. And she definitely wasn't showing off from what I remember. This is more of an instance where someone can be so determined that they might try to cut corners or rush into something too quickly. It's like she's so used to her training wheels that jumping right into two wheels can be kind of risky, especially if you're on hard surfaces. And the fact that she wants to treat herself on top of that does not make it any better.
Yeah. And then we have another athletic-themed episode, Arthur Makes the Team, which is about Arthur and the gang playing Little League Baseball, coached by Francine's dad. And a lot of the focus is on Arthur's struggles catching a baseball and being kind of embarrassed by that, which isn't much helped by Francine being her usual condescending self for whatever reason. Not logical. But, she eventually gives him some pointers and it kind of helps him improve his game. And he does slowly get a little better.
Yeah, and as you can guess with an episode like this, the central theme is teamwork.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't know too much about this particular episode, but I do remember that Francie's father was kind of new to the coaching game. Like, he came in while replacing somebody else. I forget the exact reasoning, but he's new, so he was still trying to figure it out, and he wanted to see who was good at what. But eventually, they learned to work together, and they're all the better for it.
And then 20A is Arthur's Almost Boring Day, where everyone in Mr. Ratburn's class has to write about their weekend activities, but there's not that much to do because of rain. And so Arthur and DW kind of mess with each other for a while, but then they visit their grandma, and there Arthur finds some inspiration from a stash of old, interesting things stored up in her attic.
It shows that you can really find some really interesting things in some of the most unexpected places, for one. And in moments like that, when things you would normally do get rained out, you can get really creative on what you can replace it with, depending on your surroundings. If I were in their position, I probably would find some exciting things within the house to do. And if I was really, really stuck, I might end up writing about some of the things I would typically do on the average weekend and not just that one.
Yeah, probably a good idea. I was kind of thinking back. You ever gone to a flea market?
I might have. I want to make sure I understand what a flea market actually is.
It's kind of like a public yard sale sort of thing.
Okay, then yeah, I would say I've been to something like that.
Yeah. I went to one maybe about a couple or so years ago that was kind of like in an open field in the country somewhere. It was pretty good. They had like all kinds of stuff like old music and like old magazines and house goods, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I love going to yard sales or flea markets in this case, now that I better understand what they are, because you might find something that reminds you of your childhood, or you might find something that was before your time and has a lot of cultural or historical significance, and you might find some new interest that way.
Yeah, maybe. And then finally, to wrap up, we have the half-baked scale. The half-baked sale. Let's take where Grandma is volunteering to help with a bake sale at Arthur's school, Lakewood Elementary. They are not big fans of her cooking, and it's probably not the best, but they don't have the heart to tell her it's not that great. So they let her contribute to the bake sale, but they have a plan to hide her creations like in his locker and kind of ride it out for a while. But I think sooner or later it blows up in their face.
Yeah, it's definitely an instance where you do want to be honest with a person. The trick is, in a situation like this, when you want to be honest with the person while also not being hurtful about it, it can be really tricky to find the right words.
Or balance.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you want to get the point across, but like they were struggling with throughout this episode, you don't want to upset the person. But at the same time, what they end up doing would arguably be worse because they start trying to find ideas to make sure that when this bake sale happens, they try to steer people away from her stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And trying to make sure that they make a good profit or whatever, but still, it's pretty dishonest.
Yeah, it's definitely not an approach you want to take, especially if the person finds out and you're like, wait, why would you tell people not to engage in my stuff? In a way, their hearts were in the right place, but as it's commonly said, the ends don't justify the means. It's like, yeah, you might end up getting the result you want in situations like this, but that doesn't necessarily mean the things you did to get there were okay.
No, it's not always worth it, I don't think.
In this case, it probably wasn't.
Yeah. My memory's honestly fuzzy of this one. I probably saw it only once. Yeah. Well, in any case, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll continue with the third of season 1 next time, and give our thoughts on the upcoming AU show announcements. And until then, continue streaming us on YouTube and YouTube Music, and next time we'll try to cover the third of Arthur season 1, and talk a little bit more about the coming AU show announcement, and feel free to tell us, what shows you'd like to see us put on, any thoughts on Arthur or anything, and share whatever with us.
Yeah, if you have a favorite episode that we talked about today, or even in general, feel more than free to let us know what those are. Because, as I said, one of my favorite episodes was one of the very first, all because of one joke. And if you want to hear me talk about it briefly, feel free to check out our previous episode where we went over the first 10 full episodes of the first season. If there are other shows or movies you want us to talk about in the future, you can also let us know about that. And please tune in next week as we try to wrap up season 1, as well as put in our final guesses for what our annual theater production is.
Yeah, I encourage you to put in your final guesses as well. But until next time, we'll see you.
So long, everyone.